thought I'd found stability when I joined Drayton Holdings. The office smelled of polished wood and ambition. My desk was neat, my computer humming like it belonged to me. Callum Drayton, the CEO, was everything people said: charming, commanding, brilliant. When he praised me, calling me his most promising analyst, I felt seen, like maybe I mattered. I had lost family early. My father walked away when I was 10. My mother died before I could fully lean on her guidance. Work became my anchor, my safe harbor. And Callum became, in his quiet, manipulative way, a surrogate mentor, someone I thought I could trust. But trust is a dangerous thing. Because on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday, I noticed something odd in the charity accounts. A small discrepancy. Nothing huge, nothing life-threatening, or so I thought. I brought it to Callum. I expected guidance. I expected support. Instead, I found a coldness in his eyes I hadn't seen before, a quiet storm that would change everything. The next morning, the office felt different. People avoided me. Whispers followed me like shadows. Projects I had managed were reassigned to a new protege, someone Callum had hired almost overnight. He didn't even explain why. And then the rumors started. I was emotionally fragile, overreacting. My emails went unanswered, my suggestions ignored. Deadlines changed without notice, and meetings were scheduled I wasn't informed about. Every glance from a colleague felt judgmental, skeptical. Callum continued to praise others publicly while criticizing me privately. He twisted small mistakes into catastrophes and ignored my successes. My confidence, once steady, began to crack. I started doubting myself. Had I imagined the discrepancy? Was I overreacting? The thought of being wrong gnawed at me. Then I remembered the file on my desk, the one I had glimpsed before he noticed, and my stomach sank, because the truth wasn't just a discrepancy, it was a secret he couldn't afford me to know. Late that night, I stayed behind. The office was silent, lights dimmed, shadows stretching across the polished floors. I opened the hidden folder, my hands trembling. There it was, financial records showing millions funneled from the charity into a private offshore account. Money meant for children with cancer. I sat frozen. Every number screamed betrayal. Every transaction was a lie. He had been stealing from the people who trusted him most, manipulating the public, the employees, everyone around him. And he had used me, my models, my calculations, to cover his tracks. The weight of the realization nearly broke me. He didn't silence me because I was wrong. He silenced me because I was right. My heart pounded. My life, my carefully built world of work and stability, could crumble with one accusation. But now, armed with the truth, I knew something. I had to survive. I had to be smart, careful, patient, and I would make sure he paid. The days after that discovery were hell. Callum became distant, but his eyes always watched, calculating. He started subtle manipulations, changing schedules, sending contradictory instructions, whispering critiques about my reliability. I lost colleagues' trust almost overnight. Everyone I'd once counted on now ignored me. They'd smile politely, but behind their eyes, doubt lingered. Emails were forged. Meetings I wasn't invited to were summarized inaccurately. HR quietly questioned my professionalism, planting seeds I hadn't seen. My father, estranged for years, even returned, prompted by Callum, believing my instability. The world felt like it was closing in. But anger, not despair, grew in me. If he thought I would crumble, he was wrong. If he thought I would disappear quietly, he was wrong. I realized that if I wanted justice, real justice, I had to become invisible, patient, and cunning. I would wait for the moment he underestimated me, and then I would strike. I changed my approach. I became the perfect employee. I smiled more. I nodded at everything he said. Arrived early, left late. Stopped complaining. Praised him publicly. Appeared loyal, compliant, unthreatening. Callum relaxed. He didn't suspect I was documenting everything. Emails, recordings, transactions, manipulations. I stored each piece of evidence carefully, photographing files, saving voice memos, noting inconsistencies he thought hidden. I became his shadow, silent but observant. Every small slip, every exaggeration, every forged report, I captured it. The office began to believe I was obedient. He never doubted me again. And that was when I realized, true power doesn't roar. Sometimes it smiles quietly, waits, and watches. I had the proof. I had the strategy. Now, I only had to wait for the perfect moment. The moment he would be exposed in front of everyone who ever doubted me. Callum's arrogance was his weakness. Every morning, he walked through the office radiating confidence, expecting obedience and fear. I gave him exactly that obedience, yes, but fear that would come later. I learned his patterns. When he fumed about a missed deadline, he paced alone in his office. When he laughed, it was always over someone else's misfortune. I memorized it all. Every tick of his day, every private joke, every corner of his office he assumed was private. I was invisible, perfectly so. Employees no longer noticed me or thought they did. They trusted my smile, my quiet presence. And while he strutted like a king, I gathered evidence. Screenshots of forged emails, financial documents he thought destroyed, his voice recordings confessing adjustments to the charity accounts. I felt no rush. Patience was a weapon. Each piece I saved brought me closer to the day when he would face the truth, and every whisper, every sneer, every subtle manipulation he used on me would ricochet back to him. I started planting little cracks in his facade. Not enough to alert him, just enough for the office to see. I asked innocuous questions during meetings, steering the conversation subtly toward inconsistencies he'd made in front of others. I praised his genius publicly, but made sure key employees noticed when numbers didn't add up. Callum was meticulous but predictable. His arrogance blinded him. He thought I was simply compliant, a loyal shadow. He never suspected that I could weaponize obedience. At night, I reviewed the files again, cross-referencing each forgery, each falsified report. I documented everything, every lie, every manipulation, every dollar stolen. I could feel the tension building in the office. Employees began whispering about anomalies they'd once ignored. Callum noticed the whispers but blamed fatigue, stress, me, anyone but himself. I smiled quietly. The first dominoes were in place. When the fall came, it would be spectacular, a spectacle no one would forget, and I would watch him crumble from the shadows. The worst blow came not from Callum, but from my father. After 17 years of absence, he returned, prompted by Callum's lies. "He's worried about you," my estranged aunt said, eyes full of pity. "Callum says you've been unstable, telling stories, blaming others for your mistakes." The words hit me like a blade. My father, whom I'd yearned to impress my whole life, believed him. The man I had once idealized saw me as fragile, manipulative, and untrustworthy. For a moment, I wanted to break, to scream, to tell him the truth, but I didn't. I swallowed the betrayal, letting it fuel me. If Callum thought he could destroy me, he was wrong. Now every action I took had purpose. Every smile, every nod, every compliment I gave him was camouflage. I was building my arsenal. And one day, the man who shattered my life would face consequences he could never imagine. I would rise from the ruins, and he would fall. I perfected my invisibility, arrived before anyone else, left after everyone had gone. I praised Callum incessantly in public, agreed with his ideas, laughed at his jokes. He trusted me, he confided in me, he boasted about his achievements, unaware that I was documenting everything. Emails, voice memos, financial statements, nothing escaped my lens. Every night I pieced together the puzzle, tracing his lies, his manipulation, and his theft. I studied his routines, his shortcuts, his habits. The office believed I was harmless. Even HR no longer questioned me. They were blind to the careful strategy I was implementing. I told myself it was patience, not cruelty, justice, not revenge. And yet, every time I looked at his smug face, I felt a quiet thrill. One day, all his control, all his arrogance, all the damage he had done would unravel. And I would be the one holding the threads, orchestrating every moment of his fall. By now, I had nearly everything. Screenshots of forged reports, recordings of his voice, financial statements proving his theft from charity accounts. Every piece was catalogued meticulously. Nothing could be disputed. I had become the silent archivist of his crimes. I even gained access to his private office after hours, photographing documents he assumed were safe. Files that, once exposed, would destroy him. And yet I didn't act immediately. I waited, because public humiliation would hit harder than quiet exposure. I wanted him exposed, powerless, shaking before everyone he had once intimidated. I visualized it, the gala, the awards ceremony, the crowd applauding him, oblivious to the monster behind the charm. That's when I would strike. Until then, I remained the obedient shadow, calm, collected, invisible. And every smile I gave him, every nod, every whispered agreement, was another step toward the moment I would take back everything he tried to steal from me, my dignity, my career, my life. Every day I wore my mask perfectly, smiling, agreeing, appearing loyal. Callum boasted, unaware that the person nodding beside him was his silent adversary. I watched him manipulate others, cutting deals, taking credit, basking in his false image of genius. I took notes mentally, catalogued his shortcuts, remembered the weaknesses he displayed in arrogance. Every misstep would later amplify his humiliation. My colleagues still whispered, still glanced at me, but now with curiosity rather than judgment. They noticed the patterns I subtly highlighted, questioning anomalies. Callum thought it was mere coincidence. At night, I reviewed the evidence again, ensuring there were no gaps. Screenshots, recordings, financial statements, every lie documented. The gala was weeks away, and I envisioned the moment he would crumble. He had built his empire on secrets, fear, and manipulation, but what he failed to anticipate was patience. I had time. I had precision. And when the day came, every ounce of power he wielded would become the instrument of his own downfall. And I would finally be free. It started with small things. The accountants noticed discrepancies in spreadsheets. Vendors recalled strange demands from Callum. Rumors spread subtly, though no one connected them to me. I let the seeds grow. Every whisper, every raised eyebrow, every moment of doubt in the office atmosphere was part of my design. Callum remained oblivious. He paraded through the halls, smiling at me, confiding in me, proud of his empire, blind to the shadow working within it. I met him with compliments, laughed at his jokes, praised his brilliance. And each time my mind raced, this was not obedience. This was strategy. Every word I spoke, every gesture I made was a thread in the web that would ensnare him. I sometimes caught myself staring at his reflection in the glass walls. I felt no hatred, only clarity. He had underestimated me. And underestimation is a luxury no predator should allow. Because when the moment came, every secret, every misdeed would be exposed, in front of everyone he ever controlled. Callum worked tirelessly to isolate me. Meetings were canceled without notice. Projects reassigned. Office whispers made me feel small, unstable, incompetent. I let it happen. I smiled, nodded, and became the obedient shadow. Let him think he had won. Let him feel his control was absolute. At night, I reviewed the stolen files. Every falsified report, every manipulated number, every email showing my ideas stolen and presented as his own. I cataloged them carefully, noting dates, times, and recipients. Nothing would be left to chance. I remembered my mother's words about patience, precision, and the beauty of timing. Her lessons were my shield now. Callum believed he was untouchable. But in truth, he had created the perfect trap for himself. And every night, as I sat alone in the office after everyone had left, I imagined the day his arrogance would unravel. I would stand calmly while the room watched his empire crumble. And the world would finally see the truth. Then, one late evening, I stumbled upon an email thread I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just charity funds. Callum had been siphoning money through multiple shell companies, laundering donations intended for sick children. My stomach twisted. Rage, horror, disbelief, and yet I stayed calm. I photographed the emails, recorded the voice messages where he bragged about fooling everyone. This was the moment I knew he wasn't just manipulative, he was monstrous. I realized how deeply he had controlled my life. My career, my reputation, even my family connections, all tools in his hands. But I had the power to flip the script. I smiled quietly. This wasn't just revenge, this was justice. And I would deliver it with precision. The gala was approaching. The award, the stage, the crowd, everything would be the perfect theater. He had built his empire on lies, but every lie would be exposed, one by one. And I would be the one holding the curtain. By now I was perfect, the model employee, loyal, obedient, invisible yet ever-present. I laughed at Callum's jokes, praised his genius, and walked beside him as the faithful shadow he trusted. Little did he know, every smile, every nod, every compliment was part of my plan. Each act of obedience was camouflage for the meticulous collection of evidence. I had recorded his private calls, photographed his financial manipulations, and documented every forged report. Employees began to notice small inconsistencies, whispering behind his back. Callum dismissed them as paranoia. But paranoia, in truth, was a symptom of my precision. Every meeting, every project, every private conversation became a thread in the net I was weaving. The day would come when that net snapped, and I would stand in the center, calm and unshaken, as the man who destroyed me crumbled. Until then, I smiled. I played the obedient puppet. And the puppet master waited. The week before the gala, something shifted. Callum became unusually confident, smug in a way that told me he believed my spirit was completely broken. He called me into his office with a smirk. "Arya, I've been thinking," he said, leaning back casually. "You've finally matured, I'm proud of you." Proud, as if obedience was growth, as if silence was maturity. I held my breath and forced a grateful smile. "Thank you, sir. I'm glad you see my effort." Inside, I laughed. If he only knew how meticulously I'd spent nights documenting every one of his crimes, he'd choke on the word proud. It was almost poetic. The moment he believed he had won was the moment he'd already lost. As I left his office that day, a strange calm settled over me. Not fear, not anger, clarity. I wasn't his victim anymore. I wasn't even his employee. I was his downfall, and I had already begun writing the final chapter. Then the unexpected happened. My father, the man who walked out of my life 17 years ago, suddenly appeared in the lobby of my workplace. I froze. Why now? He smiled gently, as if he hadn't vanished, as if he hadn't left me alone with a dying mother. "Arya," he whispered, "Callum reached out. He said you're struggling. I came to help." My heart cracked. Callum had contacted him. Callum had painted me unstable, dramatic, delusional. And my father believed him. I realized then that Callum wasn't content with ruining my career. He wanted to rewrite my entire life. My father placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're imagining." "Stop," I snapped. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. "You don't know me. You lost the right to judge me when you left." His face paled. I turned away, leaving him standing in the lobby like a ghost of a life I no longer needed. Callum had crossed a line. Now I would cross back. The night after seeing my father, everything hardened inside me. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. I tightened every detail of the plan. The files were organized, the recordings trimmed and clear, the screenshots labeled. And the presentation for the gala, the one that would play behind Callum on stage, was ready. Hidden behind layers of encrypted files only I knew how to access. I spent hours testing it, ensuring that the moment I triggered it, every lie would unfold in a perfect sequence, from the smallest forged email to the offshore accounts draining money meant for sick children. I didn't shake, I didn't doubt, I didn't hesitate. Callum believed the gala would celebrate his greatness. A crowd of investors, partners, employees, media, and his family would witness his crowning moment. But instead, They would witness his unraveling. I stood by the window that night, the city lights blinking below. Callum thought he owned my life. He never realized I was preparing to reclaim it, publicly, painfully, permanently. The office buzzed with excitement. People rehearsed speeches, reviewed presentations, picked outfits. Callum strutted through the building like royalty. "Big night tomorrow," he said, tapping my shoulder. "You'll be proud of me." I forced a smile. "Oh, I already am." If he looked closely, he might have seen the glint in my eyes, not admiration, but certainty. But Callum didn't look at people. He looked through them. That night, I stayed in the office later than usual, pretending to finalize guest lists. In truth, I double-checked every file in the presentation system. My heartbeat was steady, my hands precise. Tomorrow, his empire would fall, and it would be my hand that pushed it over. As I walked out of the building, I whispered to myself, "After tomorrow, everything changes." I didn't realize how true that was for him, for me, for everyone who'd ever lived in his shadow. The night before the storm is always quiet, but I could feel the thunder building. The day of the gala arrived with a strange stillness. I dressed in a simple black dress, tied my hair back, and stared at myself in the mirror. "You're ready," I whispered. For the first time, I believed it. The venue glittered with chandeliers, gold drapes, and polished floors. Cameras flashed. People laughed, unaware they were walking into the most unforgettable night of their lives. Callum entered like a king, shaking hands, giving speeches, hugging donors. Everyone loved him. Everyone trusted him. Everyone celebrated him. But I didn't see a king. I saw a criminal in a tailored suit. I positioned myself near the tech booth, waiting for the exact moment. My finger hovered near the control button. As Callum walked onto the stage, smiling confidently, applause thundered. He began speaking about integrity, honor, and helping sick children. And that was when I pressed the button. The lights flickered, the projector hummed. His lies were seconds from becoming public history. The stage wasn't his anymore. It was mine. The projector came alive behind Callum. Slide after slide, every falsified report, every offshore account, every recorded conversation spilled across the screen. The room froze, gasps echoed, phones clicked, eyes widened. Callum's confident smile faltered. He tried to recover, waving his hands, stammering. "Everyone, this is a mistake." I stepped forward, calm, steady, and unshaken. That's why I sent my boss to prison, because he deserved it. The words hit like a hammer. He tried to interrupt, but the room no longer belonged to him. The investors, the employees, even his family saw everything. For the first time, his world shrank. The smiles, the applause, the authority, all evaporated in the stark light of truth. I felt no joy in cruelty, only justice, long delayed. The man who had haunted my days, manipulated my life, and broken my trust was finally exposed. And the crowd watched it all unfold. Callum had built an empire on fear. Tonight, fear had turned on him. Panic erupted. Callum tried to push past me, to grab the laptop, to delete the files. Security rushed in, but the damage was done. Every screen, every document, every recording was already viral in the eyes of the room. He looked at me, shock. Rage, disbelief mingling. "Arya, you." I cut him off. "This is justice. For every child, every donor, every person you manipulated and destroyed." His empire crumbled in minutes. Investors called lawyers. Employees whispered confirmations. Journalists swarmed. And he realized it wasn't just a career ending. It was total annihilation. Callum's face went pale as he understood the depth of his exposure. The gala, meant to celebrate him, had become his public execution. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I stood quietly, watching the man who controlled everything finally lose control. Finally, someone else held the power. And that someone was me. By the time the FBI arrived hours later, Callum was already handcuffed, his empire collapsing under the weight of truth. Reports went viral within the day. Headlines screamed, "CEO exposed," Charity funds stolen. Financial wizard turned predator ARRESTED. My inbox flooded with messages of support. Employees who had once whispered, "She's unstable," now thanked me, some in tears. Even my father called. I didn't know," he said, voice trembling. I didn't answer right away. I let the moment hang. Finally, I said simply, "You didn't know. That's why it doesn't matter anymore." I had destroyed him without lowering myself. I had reclaimed every piece of my life he tried to ruin, and I realized something deeper. I didn't just survive. I had won. Weeks later, I reopened my life, my career, my independence, my peace. Callum was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. I received settlement money, therapy, and the first real rest I known since childhood. The company offered me consultancy, but I declined. I built my own path. Every decision now was mine alone. At sunrise, I often sat by the window, watching the city wake. The light reminded me that even after darkness, there is a beginning. No one could take that from me. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every humiliating whisper had forged me stronger. I was no longer a victim of circumstances, nor a pawn of Callum's twisted games. I was free, I was unstoppable, and finally I could breathe. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, arranging my hair. I caught my own reflection and whispered. He tried to take everything from me, but instead, he handed me my freedom. The news clips, the viral videos, the praise from strangers, it didn't define me. It validated my patience, my courage, my intelligence. I walked past my father the next time he appeared, offering apologies I no longer needed. I didn't look back. My life wasn't about proving myself to anyone anymore. It was about reclaiming joy, building beauty, and living fully. Callum's prison bars were physical. My chains had been psychological. Breaking them had taken every ounce of resolve I had, but now I could finally feel light again. I had been silenced, doubted, and humiliated, but now I was heard. I was seen. I was free. And nothing, no lies, no betrayal, no monster, could take that away.